Good morning.
Good morning.
And welcome back to our Sunday morning Kabbalah and coffee. Today we will begin, for the next few weeks, a discourse by the Alter Rebbe, by Rabbi Yisroel Spalter of Liadi, on the Kabbalah of Shabbos. In truth, we began this discourse a number of weeks ago, but we had a long break for about a month and a half now that we were doing the Kabbalah of the holidays of Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot. So we will get back to it, and we'll start again from the beginning of the discourse, also taking into consideration that we have some new students this morning. So for those two reasons, we will begin from the beginning of this discourse. What we will do is, we will be using the book of the discourse in Hebrew, and of course I will translate and explain everything as best I can. The discourse begins with a verse from the Ten Commandments. In the Ten Commandments, we know that the fourth of the Ten Commandments is the mitzvah of Shabbos. And over there it says, Zocher es yom ha-Shabbos l'kadshe. You should remember the seventh day, the Shabbos day, the day of Shabbos, to make it holy. In other words, we are commanded to make the Shabbos day holy. That's the mitzvah, to observe the Shabbos and make it holy. So the question, the Alter Rebbe is the author of this discourse. He lived about 250 years ago. Actually, his yahrzeit will be, the 200th yahrzeit will be in 2 months. So we're celebrating the bicentennial of his yahrzeit. So he asks, Lahovin inyan atzivu l'kadesh ha-Shabbos v'al-Shabbos mekadshe v'kaima. This is a very important question. What does it mean that God is telling the Jewish people that we should sanctify the Shabbos? The Shabbos is sanctified on its own before we sanctify it. Shabbos is a holy day, whether we sanctify it or we don't. God sanctified the seventh day. In fact, we learned it yesterday in the account of creation. We learned yesterday the portion of Genesis, and over there it says that God created the world in 6 days, and on the seventh day, He made it holy. That's what it says, before there was any Jew. So what does it mean that we have to make it holy? It's already holy. Lahavin, yeah. Dibi shlemi gedushis yamtiv tali bi Yisroel shel kacher mim kadosh Yisroel v'azmanim mitchil Yisroel v'achach azmanim shem Yisroel din dekadishin l'zmanim. Al b'Shabbos anu mevarach mekadosh ha-Shabbos v'einemer mekadosh Yisroel v'ha-Shabbos. V'kamaymer ot Shabbos Yisroel mekadosh v'lei v'alei b'Shabbos mekadosh v'kayim m'sheishes shmei b'reishis. Nikra kol Shabbos b'reish l'mayel v'chinush Yisroel. He explains the question. It's even greater. We know there's a difference between the Shabbos and the holidays. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Pesach, Shavuos. What's the difference? The Torah says, for example, that on Pesach, when is Pesach? When is the holiday of Passover? When you look in the Bible, in the Torah, what does it say? When to do Pesach? The 15th day of the month of Nisan, the Hebrew month of Nisan. Well, when is the 15th day? Who knows? When is the 15th day? Well, you got to go count from the first day. The question is, when is the first day? Who establishes when is the first day of the month of Nisan? Who? We do. The Jewish people do that. How do you establish the Jewish calendar? Who establishes the Jewish calendar? The Jewish courts. The Sanhedrin, the high court in Jerusalem, every month would wait based on the testimony of witnesses who say they saw the new moon. And if they saw the new moon, then they established it as the first day of the new month. And then you count 15 days and you have Pesach. So who sanctifies who makes the 15th day? Who establishes when is the 15th day of Pesach, of the month of Nisan? We do, because we establish when the first day is. In other words, the holidays is up to us. We are the ones that establish when the holidays are. So you can say, regarding the holidays, that the Jews sanctify the holidays. And in fact, when you look in the Siddur, in the prayers, on every holiday we do the Amidah, right? Mm-hmm. The Amidah prayer, the main body of the Amidah prayer is the middle prayer. You have 7 blessings in every holiday Amida prayer. First 3, the last 3, which are the same as every other day of the year. But then the middle one is the one for the holiday. How do we end off that prayer? Give me a siddur, I'll show it to you. Can you pass me that siddur? This is a very interesting distinction. We say the whole middle prayer, and how does it end? Baruch Atah Hashem, blessed are you God, Mekadesh Yisroel v'hazmanim, who sanctifies Israel and the holidays and the festivals. First Israel, and then the festivals. Why is it in that order? Because it's Israel who sanctify the holidays. So we say first Israel, and then they sanctify the festivals, because they are the ones that establish the calendar. How is that middle blessing end off on the Shabbos prayer? Let me read it to you. Let me show you. It's a very interesting distinction here. Regarding Shabbos, we don't say that. We say the whole middle blessing, and at the end we say Baruch Atah Hashem, blessed are you God. It doesn't say Mekadesh Yisrael v'HaShabbos, who sanctifies Israel and the Shabbos. It just says Mekadesh HaShabbos, who sanctifies the Shabbos, because we don't. That's not up to us. That's something God did. When He created the world, He made that 7th day holy. Whether we are, whether this Jew, it has nothing to do with us sanctifying it. So the question that the Alter Rebbe is asking over here is, since on Shabbos it is the Jewish people, is the God that sanctified the holy day, so what does it mean that the 4th commandment, God tells the Jewish people, remember the day of Shabbos and make it holy? That as if we're making it holy. God made it holy. It's not up to us. Good morning. In other words, in a sense, the Shabbos is even in spiritual level, if you want, if you will. Shabbos is higher than Israel. And that's why Shabbos stands on its holy. The holiness of Shabbos stands on its own. It's not dependent on Israel, on the Jewish people. The festivals is dependent on the Jewish people. We have to make that day holy by establishing when is the first day, when is there for the 15th day, and so on and so forth. But not Shabbos. So what does it mean that we are commanded to make the Shabbos day holy? In order to understand what it means that the Jewish people are commanded to make Shabbos holy, he first goes into a lengthy discussion to understand what is Shabbos, and to begin with, what is the dynamic, the spiritual dynamic of Shabbos. But in order to explain what Shabbos is, he first explains the idea of the creation in the 6 days, the whole creation of the world. And by understanding creation, we'll understand what Shabbos is. Because what happened on Shabbos? He stopped creating. He rested from creation. So we first have to understand what does it mean that He created and what did He rest from. Since you just walked in, a number of people, so let me just give you a synopsis of till now. It's this discourse is about Shabbos. And the question the Alter Rebbe asked is, in the 10 Commandments we're told, remember the Shabbos day and make it holy. As if the Jewish people are the ones that make Shabbos holy. So his question was, the Jewish people are not the ones that make Shabbos holy. God is the one that made Shabbos holy. By the festivals you can say we make it holy, because we establish the calendar. But the 7th day of the week has nothing to do with us. That is something that God did in the beginning of creation. He made it holy. So why are you telling us to make it holy? So he's going to start explaining first the idea of Shabbos, what Shabbos to be altogether. What is Shabbos? The Hinei Ksiv. It says in the Torah, we read it yesterday, in Genesis 1:31, it says, Vayar Elikim es kol asher osa v'hinei teiv ma'id, shebesheshis yemei bereishis v'chines es kol asher osa. In the end of creation, on the 6th day, it says that God saw that everything that He had made, and it was exceedingly good. It was very good. He enjoyed very much what He accomplished in the 6 days of creation. In other words, the 6 days of creation in the 6 days He made everything. The 6 days of creation is the time that God created everything. And he points out a nuance over here, that it doesn't say that on the 6th day God saw that everything that he created and it was very good. It doesn't say he created. It doesn't say es kol asher bora. It says es kol asher osa. It says on the 6th day he saw, and at the end he saw everything that he had made. It doesn't say everything he had created. Why doesn't it say everything that he created? In Hebrew it's osa. So he explains, Hatam sha'kosav nokat kol asher osa. The reason the verse uses the language osa, made, and not created, not everything that he created, hu lefi sha'asiyah he seif kol ha'madregis, k'mei b'nefesh ha'odam, shekeach ha'maisa shelo keach ha'achrein, v'hainu ha'tachten b'yeshu b'rtzei s'las ezedav m'kein m'cheshu m'dav ha'maisa m'shkvar v'shlav ha'achrein, v'sav ha'seil m'sois al desha g'rbaruch ha'tzimtzum v'eres z'chaysim shachs mitis baruch l'mata mata l'v'chin sa'tachrein v'chin sa'sir z'er sharas. I read fast because it's in Hebrew, but I'll explain. The word osa connotes asiya, action. God acted, made, yeah? God saw everything that he made, asher osa, and it was great. It was very good. The word osa represents the lowest, just like in a human being, right? A human being is multifaceted, made of many, many different parts. The higher levels of the human experience and the lower. What are the highest? What would you say is the highest in the human experience? Maybe his will, his intellect, and so on and so on. What would be the lowest? The faculty of action. What is action? Let's say you're fixing your table. Okay, let's say an example. So before you do that, you have to think about it. You have to want to fix it. You have to think about how you're going to fix it. You have to articulate it. And then the last thing you do is actually do it. So asiya, the action is the lowest level, the final part in the experience. So the same thing with Hashem. When it says osa, he's trying to indicate that creation of the world was already the creation of the world, the making of the world came as a result of God contracting. I want you to understand this. Contracting and lowering the life force. What is creation? The world came about. Yeah, there was nothing before, and God created the world. He made it happen. It's a life force that God invested in creation and makes it and brings it into existence. Right? Every created being has a life force from God. But that life force is already a lowered, very, very contracted, and it descended. God lowered it to the lowest level. What do I mean by contracted? So some of you that have been here by these classes already know that when God decided to create the world, he underwent a great tzimtzum, a great contraction of his light, because had God not contracted his light, had God just shined without any concealing and contracting his infinite light, nothing would be able to come about. It would be much too strong, much too godly, if you will, infinite, that anything else should take form. So what did God have to do? He had to withhold his light, contract his light, conceal his light. And after myriads of such contractions, and lower realities can start coming about, and at the end result, you can have the creation of the world. But without tzimtzum, without this contraction, nothing would have come about. So in other words, the life force that is invested in creation, this is already the lowest level of Hashem. In other words, he took his life, his light, his energy, the life force and he lowered it to the lowest level. Only then could there be creation. So what's the creation? It's asiya. The word asa, he uses the word made rather than created to indicate that the world and the creation of the world is already the lowest of all levels. the lowest of the levels as Hashem lowered it. You understand? How did God create the world? We look again in Genesis. What does it say over there? The first thing he created was what? Or the first utter. We know that in Genesis there are 10 utterances. He said, let there be light. He said, let there be a sky, the vegetables, the trees, animals, all these things. Basically, it says 9 times, and 10 times God said. Actually, it's 9, but Bereshis is also considered one of them. So it's a total of 10. That means God spoke the world into creation. The world came about as a result of God speaking. Right? God said, let there be light, and there was light. God said, let there be trees, and there were trees. This contraction and this creation came about through the combination of letters, of words. Right? Let there be light, let there be a firmament, and so on. Kloima. In other words, by a human being, his speech and his actions, his deeds are 2 separate things. If you say, let there be a house, there's not going to be a house. You still have to go and build a house. That's the first step, to think about it and then talk about it, and then you can do it. You get a contract and you actually build it. Because man's speech, you're a very limited being. It doesn't accomplish anything. Your speech, your words don't accomplish much, at least in the world of action. Nothing happens from it till you actually do something. But by God, they're not 2 separate forces. When God speaks, it happens. That's his action. Because the very words, God's very speech, is lowered and is contracted into the force of action, and it makes it happen. And things happen. The world comes into being. So in other words, God's speech is his very power of action. By us it's 2 different things. But by God it's one. That's why when he spoke, it happened. This is the idea of the 10 utterances. God said 10 times, let there be, and there was. The Hini Yeduah is known. It it's very interesting. What does it mean God created the world with words, with speech? How many letters are there in the Hebrew tongue? 22. There are 22 letters. Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet. You know the 22 letters? The Hebrew letters. There are 22 Hebrew letters. What are these 22 letters? What does an Aleph look like? As a line, and then 2 little connecting dots, or whatever you want to call it. A Beis is a line, a horizontal line, a vertical line, not a horizontal line, but it sticks out in the back. Everyone has a different picture, a different form. This is not just random. These forms, the letters themselves carry within them godly life force, a certain type of godly life force. Aleph carries within it this type of life force. A Vav is a vertical line, top to bottom. What does that represent? A force that comes from top to bottom. A Yud is a little dot. And every letter represents another type of godly life force. When you start forming the letters together, you're making words. So you're having already, you're combining different types of life forces that become the very creation that word makes up. For example, stone. How do you say stone in Hebrew? Evan. What does the word Evan mean? You know a little Hebrew? Evan. Give me a Hebrew word that you do know. Abba. No, that's not a. How do you say a table?
Table.
Shulchan. Right? How do you say a dog? Kelev. Whatever. Take any Hebrew word. All right? We'll stick to Evan, to stone that. What?
No, she's shy. She knows more.
Yeah, okay, whatever. Evan is a stone. That's the three letters that make up the word Evan is Aleph, Beis, Nun. Right? Evan. Aleph, Beis, Nun. The life force that is invested in an Aleph. The Aleph is a vessel. It's a vessel for certain life force. The very picture of the Aleph represents a certain flow of godly energy. And the picture of a Beis is another type of flow of godly energy. The Nun is a third type. When you combine these three letters together, and they form this word, which is a combination of three types of godly life, flow of godly life force, the end result is a stone. The word shulchan, a table, the shin lamed ches nun, 4 different formations of life force. When you combine them together, the end result is the physical table. That's what it means God created the world in Hebrew. The Hebrew language is it's not like any other language. What's a language? You want to identify an object, so you make a word for it. That's not what Hebrew is. Hebrew is, God made the words. Because those words represent the life force that brings about that very issue, that very creation. That's what it means He created the world with words. The words carry within them a specific flow of godly energy, of godly life force, of creative life force. Now, how many combinations of words are there? I don't know the number, but there are millions. I don't know if millions, but whatever it is, it's a lot. How many words are in the language, the Hebrew language? I never looked into it, so I don't know, but it's very many. So there are very many different types of life force. How many combinations could you make from 22 letters? You can make millions of combinations. Nimtze shasiyas, kol ma'ase bereishis, hoy sayde atziruf mashoinim shel oisis beteves she'omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu ze basarim hamaris nivreim. In other words, what does it mean God made the world? Asiya, He created the world, He made the world. It happened through these combinations of letters. He uttered words. What does uttered words mean? He allowed for a flow, for a descending, a lowering of certain godly formations, of godly life forces, that resulted in the creation of these creations. But of course, after many contractions and the lowering and the concealing and veiling and so on and so forth, to make it possible. As I said before, had He not done that, had He not concealed and contracted the light, it would have been infinite light and nothing finite could have come from it. I'll just add something that the Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya, that in the creation we only have 10 utterances. Right? So how do you have millions of creations come from 10 utterances? So he says over there that the 10 utterances were the general utterances, but from that came many different it evolved from those first 10 utterances many more utterances, different formations of letters and so on and so forth, that the whole entire creation came about. So the 10 first utterances are the very more general utterances, that certain categorical creations came into being. But within those categories there are millions of different types of creation, and that came from different, again, those first 10 utterances lowering itself even lower into many different forms of words.
Question.
Because, for example, the word Evan is not one of the first 10 utterances. Mm-hmm. The word stone, it doesn't appear in Bereshis. Right? What does appear? Oir, light, Shamayim, Rakia. General utterances were said then, But from that were then descended and evolved, and were many millions of other utterances that came about afterwards. So the 10 are not only 10. That's what he's trying to say. Yeah, what was your question?
Are you saying that the Hebrew words for these type of actions are symbolic of what God did, or actual words that God spoke?
They are the words that God spoke.
In Hebrew.
In Hebrew. He used the Hebrew language, yeah. And the words themselves became the life force for the different creations. That's what made these things come about. So the Hebrew word for stone is not just a random, we just picked a word like in English, stone. The words, these letters S-T-O-N-E have nothing to do with a rock. It's just, you want to know how to, you want to have refer to this, use this form of 5 letters. In Hebrew, it's not. In Hebrew, the very life force of those 3 letters made this rock come about. That's a certain life force that results in mass, hard mass.
And how do we know that it would have been spoken in Hebrew, that God would have said in Hebrew, or that even the Hebrew language?
Because God gave it to Moshe, he told him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So these words, when God spoke, these words, these utterances is a lowering, a descent for Hashem of the life force of God, just like by a human being. When a man starts speaking his intellect, what's speech? You speak what you think, what you have in your mind. But when you start speaking about it, it's already a lowering of the intellect into words. Take a professor, a genius, sitting alone in his lab, and he's thinking. Yeah, he's coming up with ideas, or he's thinking through an idea. So as it's in his brain, it's on a higher level. Now he has to talk it out and explain it to someone else. He has to lower it. The speech is already lowering of the intellect to another level. Just like that is by Hashem. Just like by a human being. The speech is already lowering of the idea. Because what happens when you speak it out? You can never give over in speech what's really in your mind. Entirely. It loses something in the process. You can do the best you can, but it's never the same. Because it went through a lowering, a descent. That's what speech is. If you get out 50%, you're lucky, right? 70%, 80%, whatever it is, I don't know the number. But it's lowered once it comes into speech. Same thing by Hashem. When he finally spoke out the world into existence, that represents a great descent of his godly life and energy and life force of creation. Now, we have to understand one important thing over here. God doesn't have a body, and he doesn't speak. When we use these terminologies, God spoke, God thought, God did, what does it mean? He doesn't have a mouth and he doesn't speak. The reason we refer to it as speech, by Yomer Hashem, God said, God spoke. Yeah, what does that mean? This is just a parable. It's an allegorical parable to make it more, to make it possible for us to understand what's going on. It's just so that we can apply some terminology that can make it possible for us to comprehend it. It's not that God speaks. He has a mouth and he speaks. We're using the form speech to give us an understanding of what this is all about, just like by a human being. Speech is a lowering it, so we can understand how it is by Hashem also. Why is it called speech? Why are we using the term speech? To emphasize this idea of contraction and lowering, because speech is a lowering of an idea. Because these godly forces, these godly energy, this godly life force, were contracted from their higher level in order so that they should be able to create a physical world. And in that way, that's why we call it speech. Because by human beings, the same thing. This descent we refer to as speech. Just like by a human being. When he encloses, when he dresses up his intellect, his idea into words, words are clothing, really, if you think about it. You're dressing up your idea in these words. But that's already a descent. The idea is already lowered into words of speech. Some ideas, certain parts of your seichel, of your intellect, you can't even express in words. So what does come out in words? A lower part of the idea, the lower part of the intellect that's in your brain. Certain parts of it, the more refined aspects of that intellect, you can't even express in words. So what you can express in words is already the lowest parts of the seichel, and it's already lowered. Even that part of the intellect that you could express in words is always also undergoes a certain descent once it comes into words that come out of your mouth. The same thing, just like by speech by us, that's a metaphor for Hashem, meaning we use these as metaphors. That's what happened by God. When He created the world, the life force, the energy, His chayis, His light, underwent a great descent and contraction until it came to the lowest level. And that's why it's called Osa, Asiya. Asiya is the lowest level. Action. Although by us, action and speech are two different things, by God it's one. You understand?
If he does not speak, like we understand it, how did the people at Sinai hear it?
So it says that at Sinai, what happened was God did, He arranged, if you will, that word that the people should actually hear, that there were sounds of words that were heard by the people. But Hashem doesn't have a mouth. You understand? That's what he's saying. At Sinai, people heard, because God arranged it that the revelation should be manifested in actual words, that they heard voices. They heard a voice, but there was no mouth that it came out of. But in creation, I don't know if there were voices that were heard. When God created a light, it wasn't like if you would have had a person there, he would have heard oir. And I don't think
it wasn't necessary.
That's not that it wasn't necessary. That's not what speech means over there. Go ahead.
Wasn't created together with because he said, let us. Eventually he was communicating with.
By the last creation, by man, it says, he said, let us create man. Rashi explains what does it mean that he said, let us. Who's us?
Who's that?
So it says that he was consulting the angels.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So actually he was speaking to someone.
There wasn't, consulting the angels doesn't mean that he was speaking. When you say speaking, yes, he was.
I don't mean.
So that's the point. There was some kind of communication that he was expressing an idea. I don't know how it works when you say God consulted angels. I'm not an angel.
He was
I'm
some
certainly
sort
not
of
God.
transcend.
There was a communication of some sort, but not in the conventional
Exactly.
style of speech. So when you say speech by God, it's not to be understood like by us. That he's not a human being that has a mouth that speaks and someone else hears. It's a very different kind of thing. It's a revelation. Speech would be a revelation. And it'd be the lowest revelation. In the case of creation, it's the lowest of his revelations. And that's what the result was, this lowest world. The creation of this physical world is the lowest of God's, it's the lowering into the lowest level. Follow? The Hinek Sivi says as an aside, it says in the book of Isaiah, he says, God says, the prophet says in the name of God, my thought is not like your thought. That means that there's something called, in addition to God's speech, there's something called God's thought. Right? Just like by a human being. In addition to speech, he also has thought, the power of thought, you think. The idea megal kheitz of shveis vol azulos vil al dem achshav megal sikhlem deze latsmi kigen ka she marg bnaf she zav hier az en nafsh megal lo mat sol dem achshav mau eve yori ka khlomayle ka vyach shneis vol beginnes adiber ve yemrok im kheitz ve sin gam khins machshav vol mayle mish kasuk dem achshav machshav. Just like by a human being, in addition to his power of speech, he also has the faculty, the power, the ability to think, and both of them, both powers, both faculties are a revelation of sorts. What's speech? You're revealing what you're thinking to someone else. That's what speech is. What is thought? You're revealing it to yourself. What is thought? An idea comes into your head and you start thinking about it. You're revealing that to yourself. It's becoming more revealed to you. Before you think about it, it's more abstract, it's a concept and a germ of an idea. But then you think it through, you reveal it to yourself. So both thought and speech are revelations. One to yourself and one to someone else. Same thing with God. He has speech and he has thought. Again, bris gashvis v'keiches mergosh, b'chins mashavi bri mechusa. Sheni niris mergeshes klal, k'moshe mashavis alav, sheni atam b'kebi mechusa. The difference between thought and speech by Hashem is that speech would be a revelation of His powers, of His energy, of His life forces, that can be then felt and observed by someone, by something other, and that's when creation came about. Speech means that something outside of him comes into being. He reveals it to others, the world that he created. But then there's also his thought. That is also revelations, which we would call creation. Something is coming about, but it's completely concealed from, it's within him. It's creation as it is completely concealed from any other entities. It remains within him. We'll explain what that means soon. So there's a difference between thought and speech within God's reality as well. Speech is as He creates, so that the creations can then observe and become an existence. And that's what it means. He spoke it out. It left Him, so to say. Although nothing leaves God, but that's why He uses the metaphor of speech. Because something other came about. In creation, there's a world. There are many worlds that came about as a result of creation. But what is thought? Thought is all this before it becomes revealed to any other. It's still concealed completely within his own reality. Dahainu. Shebchinis machshav nikra al mestim. Ratzolei mereir v'chayis amachai Yisrael al mestim nikra machshav al yene. B'chinis diba nikra al medizgali. He says like this: from God's thought, also creation, also worlds came about. The creations came about through His thought, but a very different kind of creation. In the Zohar, he talks about two different types of worlds. The Zohar is the basic book of Kabbalah. He talks about two different types of worlds: the revealed worlds and the concealed worlds. Almen Dizgalian, the revealed worlds, and Almen Stimin, the concealed worlds. He explains: Almen Stimin The concealed worlds are such worlds whose existence is completely covered by godliness. In other words, it didn't yet take on any existence of its own, separate existence. It's still as it is within the reality of Hashem. We'll elaborate a little more soon.
Excuse me, was that revealed 3 hours before Adam and Eve sinned?
No.
At the Garden of Eden?
No. What do you mean? What are you referring to 3 hours before? What do you mean?
Right, but whenever they may commit the sin before that, will that godliness out there?
No. The world that was created in the 6 days of creation is already the lowest physical world. That's the world that's revealed. That is already that's God's speech. That's the world that came as a result of God's speaking, which is a lower world, a world that is looks like it's separate. It has independent existence. That's speech. What is the character of speech by a human being? You're revealing it to someone else. It's leaving you. The words leave you. And someone else hears it. In the same way, it's by Hashem also. When He created the world through speech, it created an entity that is outside of Hashem, that is separate from Hashem. At least it looks like that. Nothing is really separate from Hashem. But at least in our view, it looks separate. And then that way it's called speech. It was revealed outside of Hashem's reality. But thought, worlds were created through His thought. But such worlds that never took on independent existence. It's all as it's submerged within Hashem's reality. It's much higher, spiritual, godly, and so on and so forth. This difference, the difference between these two types of worlds, the revealed worlds that, so to say, leave Him and become independent existence, outside, separate existence, and the concealed worlds which remain submerged and one with Hashem, the difference is the type of life force that created those two worlds, those two types of worlds. This is a much higher kind of godly life force, and this is a much lower and more contracted and more concealed life force. Where God is revealed, nothing else is revealed. You understand? Where God's energy is completely revealed and it's infinite, nothing else can be revealed. So what will be created from that? Such a type of existence that has no independent existence. It's all as if part of the godly reality. Because nothing outside of God can come as a result of such high-level revelations.
So you're talking about
I want you to understand this.
There's no free will in the world?
No.
Is that why Moshe said the obvious is ours?
What?
Is that why Moshe said the obvious is ours?
The who?
The obvious is
The obvious is for us,
and
yeah.
The heading is...
That's right, yeah. That's what it means over there. The higher the godly life force, the more the result of that is going to be godly. In other words, how could this physical world come about? Only because God withheld, completely concealed and veiled the godliness that is invested in this world. When He's concealed, this can be revealed. If He's revealed, this can't be revealed. Then there's only Him. Where He's in full revealed mode, there's nothing else. So when we say that through His speech came about this physical world, speech represents complete concealment. And that's the meaning of speech. It left Him. Something else came about because He completely concealed that life force. Thought is a much higher type of life force. The worlds that are created through thought never really become separate. What's your thought? It's still part of you. What's the thought in a human being? The idea is still part of you. It's still within you. The worlds that were created through His thought are still submerged and one with Hashem. In other words, the letters of speech are God having lowered his life force, his energy, his light, all the way down till it became very, very concealed and contracted, and as a result, our physical world can come about. So it's a great lowering of his life force. The nikra eisis lashon is galus, lashon targum os v'os. It just says that the word for letters in Hebrew is otiyot. What does the word otiyot mean in Hebrew? Or it says that in the Unculus, the Aramaic translation of osios, comes from the same word as osa. What is osa? Osa boiker. The morning arrived. It means it was revealed. Light was revealed. So Eis just means revelation. Okay. What is words? Words are revelations. That's what he's saying. But it's a lower revelation. It's very, it's very contracted and so on. He explains now the reason why letters mean from the same Hebrew word as revelation, as we just said. Letters the idea of letters reveal. What does it mean that letters reveal? So we explained it already, but he just adds another point to it. Just like by human speech, yeah. Let's take an example of a human being. When you tell someone, I love you. What is that? That's what you did was, in you felt an emotion to that person. And that emotion you then revealed to that person. That means first you felt an emotion to that person, I felt an attraction to that person. And that you express in words of love. Right? You reveal it to that person. When you tell him, I love you, I can't wait to be with you, and so on and so forth. So words reveal. What is words? Words are you are revealing to someone else what's going on in your life, in your existence. Whether it's emotions, whether it's intellect, makes no difference. The same thing with Hashem's speech. It reveals. So I'll take this a step further. In the human experience, there's a certain order. The highest is, let's say, intellect. Intellect produces emotions. When you understand something, you start feeling an attraction and emotion for that thing. Yeah? Once you have an emotion for it, you begin talking about it. And once you start talking about it, you're motivated to do something about it. For example, someone came back from a vacation and told you about this vacation. What a great place. You never saw the scenery, the weather. It's incredible. So you're thinking about it. You're thinking about it, you're hearing about it, you're thinking about it. Then you start wanting that thing. You start wanting it. Once you start wanting it, you have to now articulate to your wife, to your husband, to so on. Or maybe we should do this. And then you buy the ticket and you go. That's the process, right? It's true with everything, yeah? Now you can apply that to God. You think about the greatness of Hashem. So that produces a feeling for Hashem. Once you have a feeling for Hashem, you start talking about it. And then you do start doing mitzvahs, and you start getting close to Hashem. You start acting on it. That is a process. So what is speech? Speech is the next step after emotions. Speech reveals what's going on in your emotions and in your intellect. The same thing with Hashem. When God speaks, it's in those words are enclosed His emotions. God created light on the first day, yeah? What's light? It says that,
separation from darkness.
A separation of what?
From darkness.
It's more than that. It's okay, yes, true. But it says in Chassidus that the first day was the result of his attribute of chesed, of his attribute of kindness. The second day was a result of his attribute of severity, judgment, and so on. Every day another emotion. So the words, let there be light. Light is giving, shining. The world is the morning, right? The daytime. It's light. It's good. It's people are in a better mood by day than by night. God is giving by day. When He creates light, it's His attribute of kindness coming into expression. So the words "yet there be light" in those words are enclosed His emotion of kindness, His emotion of love, His emotion of giving, of goodness. So words, what He's trying to say is that in the words that God used to create are enclosed His higher emotions, His intellect, and so on and so forth. What are the 6 days of creation? Basically, the 6 days of creation, the utterances that He uttered in those 6 days are expressions of His 6 godly emotions. All the 6 spheres, all the emotions. And you'll see something interesting. Inyan Zeh, let's see it inside. And then this will stop today. This idea, that the creation is a result, in other words, in creation was revealed His emotions, the 6 spheres, the 6 godly attributes, is sourced in the Zohar. It says this in the Zohar. When it explains the verse, it says, we say it in Kiddush on Friday night, Sheishis Yomim Osa Hashem Es HaShemayim V'Oretz. 6 days Hashem made the heaven and the earth, right? It doesn't say in 6 days. It should have said Bisheishis Yomim. In 6 days God made heaven and earth. But it doesn't say that. It says 6 days God made heaven and earth. What is the meaning of this? Why does it say it that way? Because that's exactly what He made in those 6 days. He made the 6 spheres. He created the 6 godly attributes in those 6 days. The very day is a creation. You understand what he's saying over here? In other words, the 6 days are the 6 godly attributes. Every day representing another godly attribute. And through that, He created the creations that came about in those 6 days. So what did He do first? He created the 6 attributes. He created His emotions. And that he enclosed then in the utterances, and as a result came the whole creation, the physical creation that we have. Well, what was the first thing He did? He created the 6 emotions. Because God is beyond emotions. You understand? And it's a very important point. This is a whole trickling down, an evolution of spiritual worlds coming about one after the other until the final result is this world. But in order to have this world, He had to first create His attributes, those godly attributes, which He Himself is way beyond them. So all this came about in those 6 days of creation. So it's not that in 6 days, it took Him 6 days. The very 6 days were created. The very source of those 6 days, which are the 6 spheres, were created then. To sum this up, he's explaining over here about it, basically, the idea of Shabbos. But in order to understand Shabbos, he first wants us to understand with 6 days, creation itself. And creation is through God's speech representing the lowering of God's life force, His godly energy, completely lowered it, and it evolved after myriads of contractions until the final level, which is the physical creation of this world. And those are done through letters, through words, but the words are not that God has a mouth, but that it's a metaphor for a lowering of his life, or just like by human being, it lowers his intellect into his words. The same thing, God lowered his life force into to make the ability for creation to come about, and it's through a great tzimtzum, a great contraction. And then he went and explained there's also letters of thought, letters of speech, two different kinds of godly life force, one higher, one lower, and the result is very different depending on where what life force is used, and so on and so forth. So the letters of creation represent basically a lowering of God's energy to be able to create this physical world. We're not finished yet, obviously, but we'll continue next week. Sunday morning at 8 o'clock. Thank you very much, and have a great week.